Hello, everyone, and welcome to another very special episode of the 1973 podcast. It is so happy for me to welcome a favorite flyer of mine, Bob Froese. I was mentioning before we went on the air, I love the jersey in the back. Just seeing that 35 on the back of the jersey, just the kid in me just comes right out. And I'm so happy that we were able to sit down for a little while and make you, as I always like to say, a friend of the show, Bob. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. I can assure you that.
So I always start off every podcast with asking our guests, how did you get started as a kid on your hockey journey?
Well, I think like all guys growing up in Canada, my dad flooded a rink probably when I was 3 or 4 years old, and started playing there, in the backyard, and just loved it. He was a goaltender, so I always loved being a goalie. And then my parents eventually split up. My dad moved back to Calgary, so we didn't have much money. I was a kid from a single mom. So when I went to finally sign up, probably at 11 years old, they said that goaltenders free equipment and even free sticks, and I said I'm going to be a goalie. So that was my introduction into first, truly becoming a goaltender.
So take us back to when you were a youth, and was there a favorite team that you had or a player that you kind of really were drawn to? You know, that kind of motivated you watching on TV, or were you all in like that?
Yeah, I was a huge Bruins fan, and more specifically, I was a huge Cheesy fan.
Oh,
Retrievers, and I just love him. And he's from the same hometown where I'm from. I'm from St. Catharines, Ontario. So is he. So that was to me. I used to ride by the house that he grew up in, which wasn't that far from where I lived, and it was just a real big deal. So yeah, I love the Bruins, and then it was great because eventually, when I got to play for the Rangers, Phil Esposito was our GM, and that just a fantastic guy. But all the Bruins, like a lot of the Bruins would show up. I mean, that team, they were tight. The team, from the early '70s and that, and Wayne Cashman. I shared an office when I went onto the coaching side. I shared an office with Wayne Cashman, who was just a fantastic guy too. But just to meet all these guys, and especially number four, to meet him and to get to know him, I was like a kid in a candy store. And I can just tell you, one game in Madison Square Gardens he was in, and I just so happened to be the first star of the game. And as I was coming off from skating around for the first star, he's standing there outside the locker room, and he said, "Great game, Froese." And I don't think my feet touched the ground for the rest of the walk into the locker room. But to hear from Bobby Orr, great game. That to me was one of the highlights of my career.
so not to seem like a fanboy, but that feeling that you had right there that you described, anytime that we've had somebody on the show that we loved growing up and get a chance to talk to them, that's kind of how we feel. And we kind of, I can't bring the energy through enough to tell you that that's how we are as fans, and having you guys on, that everyone that we've had from the NHL alumni, we're just super happy and ecstatic to have you on. So at what point in your playing growing up did you know that you basically might have a shot to take this somewhere?
Well, it wasn't my first year, I'll tell you that, because I was absolutely brutal. I remember one time they shot the puck from the other end, and I went out to really swipe at the puck, and I missed it. And I remember leaning over, looking between my legs as the puck entered into the net. And so I wasn't very good, but eventually, when I guess, like most guys, when I became 14, we went to the All Ontario Finals, and then as a 15-year-old, I played minor midget. I played major midget as a minor midget as a 15-year-old, and practiced with the St. Catharines Blackhawks, who were in the OHA back then. And that year we won All Ontario, and so I figured at that point, in a tournament in Quebec, I had won most valuable player, and just remember my coach saying, this is your ticket. This medal is your ticket into playing in the OHA." So that was my goal back then. I just wanted to play in the OHA. I mean, the NHL seemed so far. It was like the clouds. But I just wanted to play in the OHA, which is now the OHL.
So we always ask if you have any funny draft day stories. Do you remember your draft day?
I remember my draft day because I had done some my final year. I'd been with Hap Ems and the Ems family since I was 15, and so I played 4 years junior. And my last year, I made some very poor decisions, and it affected me greatly. Now, I not only I played for Niagara Falls, but we didn't make the playoffs. But then the Toronto Marlboros picked me up, and we played Kitchener Rangers that in the playoffs, and I was, playing for the Marlboros, and I didn't play specific, very well, and I was kind of like uh, playing for Hap Ems, who they never used tape on their shin pads. He was a big fan of a guy named Eddie Shore, and so they used skate laces, and I had pads. A pair of Kineski pads, but they were worn by a guy 10 years earlier, and so they'd just been passed down, and these pads were so bad. When I got to Toronto, they gave me a brand new pair of pads and all this brand new equipment, and I should have stayed with what I was comfortable with, but instead I wore these brand new pads. It wasn't a very good decision on my part, but I think because I didn't play that well, I dropped way down in the draft and eventually got drafted by St. Louis and 160th overall. So I knew I had a long road before me, to make it to the NHL.
So before we get into talking NHL, I want to ask Derek and Ed if they got a question apiece for you. Ed, question for Bob.
Sure. Sure, Bob. I'd like to ask you, like, what did you do kind of in the off season, or who was the coach, or what did you do particularly to take that jump and that huge leap from not being very good to where you went to before you.
It's a good question. I think a big part of it, and I work with goaltenders in Buffalo here, and throughout the country. We have a goaltending school that I help a young man out here, Nick Villardo, in Buffalo. But I always say, the number one thing to being a goalie is loving the position. If you don't love the position, you are not going to improve. Because it's so easy to find things to blame, and circumstances to blame. But I had some good people in my life who told me my mom would never allow me to have the poochy lip. All right, and never feel sorry for myself, and not to complain. And so I think that was a big part of it, is taking that attitude and growing into a guy who was going to work hard. And I always had was instilled in me to work hard. I grew up like on the farms and that. And so I didn't want to drive a tractor for the rest of my life. And so I think that, drove me to want to be a hockey player. And when I found out that you could make decent money, playing hockey, that was just the cherry on top. But as far as I just kept myself in good shape and did a lot of drills that nowadays I see them doing all the time. But I had an uncle who was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, so he taught me all about stretching and different moves and that, and it really helped out.
Derek, do you have a question for Bob?
I do. Before the questions, first time on the 73 podcast, Andy, we have a doctor on the show. We have a Turner Cup champion on the show. And for my research, the first goalie to tie a water bottle to the back top of the net. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Bob. And so my first question is, they've gone through, your trajectory and your path. The research I did said that you came up as a butterfly goalie. Is that correct? And if so, where did that come from? Because that seems a little early for that kind of style. And then from what I read, Bernie Parent got you to do more of a stand-up goalie. Is that correct?
Well, for the most part, yes. I was a butterfly goalie, and and back then, there weren't many. Glenn Hall, kind of, and then Tony O came in Chicago and really perfected it. But stand-ups were considered the way to go. And it was actually a guy named Jacques Plante who was Bernie Perrant's goaltending coach. And if you do the history there, Bernie really kind of was trying to find his way until he got to Toronto, and Jacques Plante took him under his wing. And Jacques Plante really made Bernie into who Bernie was. Now Bernie always was had all the tools, but Jacques Plante really taught him. And Jacques Plante's the one who taught not only myself, but for a couple of years, we had a great stable of goaltenders. There was Pete Peters, Rick St. Croix, myself. There was Pelly Lindbergh, although Pelly was a Bernie, clone, who was Jacques Plante's, Bernie was Jacques Plante's student. And then there's Sam St. Laurent. And so we had a number of guys that Jacques took and really taught us about a plan on how to play. And so instead of being worried about what the other guy was going to do, what the other team was going to do, he taught us to have a plan and to work the plan. And he taught me how to stand up, how to be a stand-up goaltender. And then eventually I became a guy who could do both. All right. But I found that I played my best when I stayed on my feet.
So, Bob, I got to ask you because you mentioned him in all the flyers that we've had on. We got to get at least a Bernie Perrant story.
Bernie Perrant story. He would come in, and sometimes, Bernie was a great goalie, but he would have to look over top of your stall to see your name to remember who you were, and so that was kind of like you wondered, okay, but he was just the type of guy that was friends with everybody, and boy, I tell you what. He didn't have to talk about how good he was because in Philadelphia he's kind of like a god, but he was just a humble guy, and hey guy, and he would say hey guy because he couldn't remember anybody's name, and so but he was a fantastic teammate to those guys, and just like the Bruins, the Flyers, those teams that won. They had a bond with them, and I think Fred Chero wrote that before they won their first Stanley Cup. He said, if we win tonight, we will go down together as we'll never be separated. All right, from this. So it was really a bonding moment, and Bernie was a big part of that. I think he won the Conn Smythe 2 years, a couple years in a row for the MVP in the playoffs, but. I've watched clips of him, and even just recently, I watched a clip about him playing Buffalo, and it was just amazing. One of the few goaltenders that had quicker feet than hands, and Pelly Lindbergh was exactly the same. He had quicker feet than he had hands, which is rare. Most guys' hands are quicker.
So, do you remember your NHL debut?
I sure do. Hartford, and I. Bob McCammon was our coach, and he had coached me in Maine the year before, and so I flew in to Hartford to meet with the team, and they put me with a guy named Miroslav Dvorak, who was one of the first Czechs, maybe even the first Czech to come over, and he knew no English. He knew two words: Budweiser and Marlboro. Those were two words he knew, and so they had me rooming with him. And now, McCammon was quite a jokester, but I remember he came to the hotel door, and he said, "Okay, just want to let you know you're going to play tomorrow night." And that was shocking because I thought I was just coming up to back up because Pelly had gotten hurt playing against the Russians, and so and he said his final words as he left the hotel room was, "Don't F it up," and so that was his encouragement to me. But I went to the game, and my name back then they had Velcro on the back of guys' jerseys that had been called up, and my name was sewn in to my jersey, to number 35, and I knew that's a good sign. That's a good sign that my name is sewn in. And we went out, and I'll just tell you, 10 minutes into the game, I went up to stop the puck behind the net the way I'd been coached, and it hit the dasher board and caromed out in front of the net. And there I am standing, behind the net, waiting to stop the puck. And it's in the slot, and they put it in the net. And I thought, oh, is this going to be this kind of night? But we went on, and there was a guy named Merlin the Magician, Merlin Malinowski, who played for them. He was a big goal scorer. And in the second period, I stopped them on 2 breakaways. And I tell you what, one of the best feelings at the end of that game, we won, not because I played fantastic, but because we scored more goals than they did.
Well, Bob, take us through that first game and then the next 12 after that, because it's a pretty significant stretch that you had to start your career. It's actually a record setting. So any good memories from that 12-0-1 start?
Yeah, there was a couple of shutouts, but one was in the island. It's and the island and obviously the island and the Flyers were were really competitive rivals, and the Islanders had beat out the Flyers in the Stanley Cup Finals to win their first cup, I believe, and so it was pretty competitive, and we beat them in their rink in Uniondale 1-0, and I'd like to say I played fantastic, but I'm going to tell you what, you want to talk about lucky or a horseshoe or anything like that. I'm looking one way and the pucks hit me from the other way. And I just remember at the end of the game, winning 1-0 in the island was just such a great feeling. And then, someone asked me recently, what was it like, to have that kind of a start? I said, it was a lot better than losing your first 13 games. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the team was really good. And I think we believe that no matter what, even in Buffalo, that was where I lost we lost the first game where I played. And I think the final score was 4-2. But even sitting on the bench when it was 4-2, I still believe that we could somehow tie it up. We just had that kind of team. And Bobby Clarke was a great leader, just a great leader. I've been fortunate to see two great leaders, up close, and one was Bobby Clarke, and the other one was Mark Messier.
And do you have a question for Bob?
As you kind of progressed, from early in your career, as your career went along, I'm kind of like the exercise science guy, so I always ask the exercise science type questions. So I find it interesting, and like, what did you do to prep yourself? Early on in your career, fresh when you were coming, out of the minors, playing up there in Maine, and then going to and really kind of finding your home in the pros. But like, take us through like what your off season was and that type.
Right. Well, I really came through the morphing of pro hockey, and because when I when I started, the first training camps you go to, you'd have to, as a goalie, you're in the goaltender stance, and so your thighs, your thigh muscles, we didn't work out during the summer really. We ran a little bit and stuff like that, but we did not come to camp the way they come now. All right, so your roommate in training camp would have to help you, get off the can because your thighs were just killing you. And then on top of it all, they're making you, I don't know if you've ever seen the wall seat, but they're making you had to do the wall seat for 5 minutes. And if you did the wall seat for 5 minutes, you didn't have to do it anymore as a goalie. Only the goalies had to do that. But good thing I had strong legs. And so, every year, the first time I did it, I got through it, so I didn't have to get any more torture put in. But now, as so guys came to camp to get in shape. Now here comes a guy named Mike Keenan, and who's he's a cutting edge coach, and all of a sudden we've got the Olympics going on. All right, and guys are trying. How many times can you bench press your weight? You have to run. You have to run a mile and a half, and I forget what it was, 10, 11 minutes or something like that. And if you didn't, you had to ride the bike at the end of the day, and they were pretty grueling back then. But you had to come at that point in shape, and if you didn't, you were tortured. When I say tortured, but you had to do a lot extra, so everyone knew enough to come in shape. And so that's when all of a sudden the training books were sent out to us, and then we were given a regiment to work on. And during the summer, and guys got a lot more serious about it, and so the team, and in Philadelphia, we had a guy named Pat Croce, who was our physical conditioning coach, who went on to be the president of the Sixers. And that's when he got Ellison Iverson really playing, and Charles Barkley got Charles to lose the weight. I mean, he was just a fantastic guy. He was also a black belt. All right. And so, I remember the first time he was there in training camp, and we were playing soccer or something like that. We had different things that we did. And on the soccer field, Homer went up to him, Paul Holmgren, and had his put up his fist like this, and Croce, boom, hit him and put Homer's nose on the side of his face, and Homer's bleeding like a stuffed pig. And Croce said, "Don't ever raise your fist and unless you mean it." And so from then on, whenever I was around Croce, I had my hands hanging down like a gorilla. You know what I mean? Because I didn't want him to ever think I was going to do anything stupid.
Nice.
Hey, Bob, did you have a welcome to the NHL moment?
Well, I would say this, that on the plane, uh, two things. After the game in Hartford, you pack your gear up, and you get showered in that, and there's my duffel bag, and the goalie's duffel bag is huge, and so I went to throw it over my shoulder, and the trainer, who actually our youngest, we have four sons, our youngest son is named after Kurt Munt, said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm putting my bag on the bus to go to the airport." He said, "You don't have to do that." He said, "This is the NHL now." He said, "We take care of your equipment. You'll never have to touch your equipment like that again." I said, "Well, this is pretty good." And then on the plane, Bobby Clark came and talked to me, and your eyes are wide open because everything everything is brand new, and you're just so excited to be there. But Bobby Clark sat down next to me on the plane, and he said how he just really encouraged me. And he was a great encourager, and he said how stopping those two breakaways in the second period really won the game for us, and that. And so, I mean, you hear a lot of encouragement from different guys, but when Bobby Clark is telling you, it was really something. And if you don't mind, I could tell you another Bobby Clark story.
Oh, please do.
All right. So after my rookie season, in which we won a lot of games when I played, and most of the games when I played, I got in fantastic shape that summer. My wife and I, we bought our first home. We had our first son. Bobby, I signed a 4-year contract, which was one-way money, and it was such a it was like a dream come true. And so I came to camp and ready to play, and I have a poster up here where they used it as the to sell season tickets. It was of me making a save, and so I was pretty primed, to do this, and to have a great season. And we started, and we would have two scrimmage games, one in the morning. So what we do is you go, and there was 4 teams. There's usually about 70 guys at camp then, but there's four inter squad teams. Okay. And so they would play each other. And so you'd play one team in the morning, and then you'd play a different team in the afternoon. But in between, you would do weights after you had the first game, then go have lunch, have a nap, come back, have the second scrimmage game, and then go for some type of aerobic work, like running or whatever. And then the guys who had come to camp not in good shape would have to ride the bike after. So that was you didn't want to be in that crew. Anyways, I couldn't stop a beach ball. I couldn't stop a backhand from center ice, and I was so frustrated. And after the third day, the morning scrimmage, once again I just sieved out. And Bobby Clark said to me, "Hey, Froese, let's go for lunch." And I'm thinking, here's a future Hall of Famer, MVP, and that wants to go for lunch with me. This is fantastic, So we go out for lunch, and he's talking, we're that, and all of a sudden he says, you haven't been playing well, and and I said, yeah, to say the least, and I'm really frustrated in that. And he said, "We watched you last year." And he said we laugh on the bench sometimes because when there was a face-off in our end, and the ref would be flipping the puck, in his hand. They don't do that anymore. They put the puck on the ice to wait for the face-off. But he said when the ref was flipping the puck, you were just following that puck. You were just following that puck. He said, "Now I'm watching you." And he said, where all the cameras are, and the people that want to interview you, and God bless them, the kids who want autographs, where all this other stuff was going on. He said, but and on the ice, you're telling the defensemen how they should play. And he said, this morning I even heard you telling the forwards how they should play. So he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a puck, And he handed it to me across the table. He said, when we go back, he said, I'm not a goaltending coach or anything like that, but when we go back, you know what I encourage you to do? Just keep your eye on this. Just keep your eye on the puck. And I went back and I did exactly what he said. I kept my eye on the puck, and guess what? That year, I was in the top, 7 categories for goaltenders. I was in the top 5 for all of these 7 categories. And so that day, my ability returned to stop the puck, and it was all because Bobby Clarke encouraged me to keep my eye on the puck. And what I did do, and I still have that puck, but I kept that puck for the rest of my career and kept it with me. All right, to remind me, keep the main thing the main thing. All right, don't get so caught up in the window dressing. And so I owe a great deal to Bobby Clarke.
Some flim-flom veteran savviness there, if you will, huh?
You better believe it. Yeah.
Nice.
Derek,
nice.
take it with the next question.
Okay, so you mentioned Keenan. I wanted to pivot. Could we go to the 85 season? And with respect to the circumstances, we can talk about you become the number 1 goalie and your season from there. Can we talk about that season and how that great season for you and how you carried that through from 1985, 86?
Well, like I said earlier, I was trained not to whine, not to complain, not to poochy lip, and it was it was not the type of circumstance anybody would plan out. And in fact, my coach from the minors, and when we won the Turner Cup, Don Perry had been into, we played Boston the night before Pelly was in the horrendous car accident, and he had phoned my wife because the next morning I was at the hospital initially, and then at the practice rink with the team. But he had phoned my wife and said, "We've got him," and I had been traded to Los Angeles. All right, for Jay Wells, and so they rescinded the trade because of what happened. All right, so which was good on LA's part, and because Philly could have been left with no goaltenders, and so but it was tough, and it was tough partially because I didn't exactly have a great relationship with Mike Keenan. Now, let me just say, Mike Keenan is a psychologist practicing without a license, okay? And like some of these coaches are, what he recognized in Pelly, and I think Pelly was maybe the first one he did it with, but I think he did it with other guys too, that his number ones. The worse he treated me, the better Pelly played. And if you understand, Pelly needed to be the number 1. Pelly, it's like if you watch Scotty Scheffler golfing, Scotty is a good front runner, but he's not a good, guy catching up, So Pelly was the same way. And Mike understood that. Now, I think Mike was genius for doing that. All right. And he got Pelly to play. All right. And play phenomenal. I'm telling you, Pelly played phenomenal. All right. But so he had treated me, like I was the redheaded stepchild. And so now all of a sudden, I'm playing all the time. And so we had, somewhat of a combative relationship. And I, it was tough. But I will say this: the team was so good to me and for me, and it really, other than playing, New York in the playoffs and Van Beesbrook, stoning us, but we had a great season. I don't think we lost the game. I think we were like 44 and 0-2 of going into the third period leading. I mean, we had just a real solid team and great defensively, tough, everything you wanted on a team. And so within that, I think it comes, you just realize, now I look back and think it was a tough position to be in, but in the moment you don't have, and like I say, I was trained to not be a whiner. And so, just look at the bright side. And the bright side was, I was playing and we were winning. And so, if we were losing, it would be a whole different story. But I really enjoyed that year. Although, one of the things that when you're replacing someone who's passed away like that, it's kind of like replacing Bernie when Bernie had the eye injury. Like, then it's like Bernie never let in a bad goal, after that. Everyone, has, idolized her, in such a way. And there was the same way, kind of with Pelly, that, that I was trying to meet and I said all along, I'm not Pelly. I'm Bob Froese. I'm a totally different guy. I'm a totally different goaltender. And so, but I enjoyed it. And like I say, I just remember Bobby Clark, once again, now he was GM at that point. He was so good to me and so encouraging, but not only him, but a bunch of the guys in the team. And I really think that year, it was a maturing year for all of us, because I don't think any of us ever, and I don't think any professional athlete thinks they're going to die. And we had to look death square in the face.
That 85-86 season was tremendous. And from my personal collection is you and the Beezer. And Bob, in my research today, so you were second team All-Star. Johnny was first team All-Star. Beezer won the Vezina. You were out by two votes, 2 points. I got to tell you, you deserve the Vezina. And I'm a John Van Beesbrook guy, and he and Mike Richter, we'll talk about Mike Richter a little later. Those are my guys, but tied for the league lead in wins. You led the league in save percentage, goals against average, shutouts. The only thing that John had on you was he played 10 more games. So I'm here today to say that though the 12-year-old Derek wanted the Beezer to win the Vezina, right now, 52-year-old Derek says, Bob Froese, you were the 85-86 Vezina Trophy winner in my book.
Well, I appreciate that, but I was just glad that the season went the way it did, because it could have been, it could have gone totally different. But I really appreciate it. Someone sent me a clip from a book that Mark Howe wrote, and Mark said that like a lot of times you have a backup goaltender or whatever, and you have to change the way you play. And he said, we never had to change when, Froese was, a good goalie. And so I mean, I appreciate what people have said, and, reporters or whatever, but more importantly, I appreciate what my teammates said, because what I always wanted to be known as a good teammate. And through all of that, I think I proved that I was a good teammate, and really enjoyed playing in Philadelphia. That's putting it mildly. I loved Philadelphia. We loved Philadelphia, my wife and I. And even when I got traded to the Rangers, don't tell anyone this, but I was still a Flyers fan. So I remember when Thomas Sandstrom, Dave Brown almost took Thomas Sandstrom's head off.
Oh, yeah.
And they came right to me after, in the garden. They came right to me and they wanted to know what I thought. And I took some heat for this, but I said, Dave Brown's a good friend of mine. And that was not a popular, they did not want me to say something like that, but I really appreciate those guys. And I had a lot of fun playing with them and against them. And, when we were in the garden and it was in the playoffs, and we were beating the Flyers, and I was playing, and Lindsey Carson, in Flyer fashion, ran me over in the crease. There's clips of this, on YouTube and that. And so I realized there's a delayed penalty, and my stick had gone flying. So I'm just skating without a stick to the bench for a delayed. And all of a sudden I come up behind Lindy, and all I was going to say to Lindsay was, sucked in, Lindsay, like that you got a penalty, and I said, sucked. And he turned around and saw me, and he swung. Well, he missed me probably by a foot. Okay. But then, I'd seen Billy Smith take a few dives. And so I thought, okay, this is a good time for a dive. So I went down, and then I, I got back up. A big brawl ensued, and I went to the bench, and there's Cashman, and he says, "Froese, go down one more time." So just as I get to the door, I go down again, and our trainers, we had a trainer who's like not a real big guy, 4'11", Jocko K, and he's giving me pretend smelling salts and saying, do you still love me, Froze, and all this and that. And so I took my mask with one hand and I grabbed him with the other one and I kissed him. And Esposito had been, telling to everyone, don't laugh. Nobody laughs here because, it's kind of funny what I was doing. And so then even Espo started laughing when I kissed the trainer, So, anyways, I went back to the net, and there's, I'm it's in the second period, so I'm down by the, where the Flyers bench is, the visiting team bench, and I get down on one knee and I take my stick and I turn it around like it's a rifle, and I'm shooting Keenan, all right, like with my rifle. The fans are just going nuts, all right. They're, chant my name and that. And the guys on the bench, because in Philadelphia, you don't laugh on the bench, especially with Keenan. And they've got their hands over their face just howling,
That's great.
And anyways, we won the game, and that was great.
Did you fight Peter Zezel? Did I see that somewhere too?
Well, if you see the clip, it's just because Zezel pulled my one leg, and I, I never I don't know. I when I came up through the Flyer system with that mentality, that it was either fight or get beat up, and so and don't let anyone abuse you, and so I never let anyone run me in the net without making sure I tried to keep things even. But Peter took my one leg, and so. And pulled it aside, and so then I just gave him the old blocker sandwich, and we ended up having a little tussle and stuff like that. But things like that happened. But I wasn't going to. I sure wasn't intimidated by playing the Flyers because I knew all these guys. So, if Brownie would have come after me, then I think I'd have hightailed it out of there. That's for sure.
And so that mindset, that style, you are the Rangers' single season record for goalie penalty minutes.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
The farm boy from just a farm boy from St. Catharines. You know what
That's
I mean?
great. That's great.
Bob, I got to ask you too, how did the transition happen from the Flyers to the Rangers for the people that don't know?
Well, initially I thought I was going to the Rangers to be traded somewhere else, and they had said, they had other places that I possibly. So that's what I thought. I thought I was just going there for a short time, and then I would be traded somewhere else. But Esposito and I got along really well, and so he decided that I was good for the team, and he wanted to change the culture of the team, and I was there, and then. You mentioned Mike Richter. So I roomed with Richter, and
Yeah.
my responsibility was, and this is from Roger Nilsson then, was to protect Richter and to keep, Richter was, I mean, just a committed athlete, and but just and in no way, shape, or form was it to keep him on the straight and narrow because he was more straight and narrow than I was, but just to protect him. All right. And sometimes goalies, if you understand what I'm saying here, sometimes goalies can be competitive and, say things or whatever. And so my responsibility was to protect Richter.
Great. And he was your roommate? You never had a roommate? Is that with Mike was your
Yeah.
roommate?
Never had a roommate before Richter because goalies don't have roommates. At least when I played, they did. And but Richter abused me big time. You know, he would he'd bring saran wrap and put it over the toilet, so you get up at night. Or he put crackers in your bed. You know what I mean? One time we were in LA and he had to go meet his sister early, so he ordered up about $150 worth of room service, all right, to be delivered to the room as he was checking out. And so he was a funny guy and just a real a great teammate and a guy I really enjoyed playing with.
On the trade, Bob, you were traded for Kjell Samuelsson. You were not a short, you were 5'11", I believe, in playing days. that wasn't a short goalie for me. I'm thinking Darren Payne. I mean, the Beezer was 5'8". I couldn't find anywhere where there was a goalie under 6 feet traded for a 6'6" defenseman. So that was. Did you see any changing of the guard as in your later years with the size of goalies? And now, can you where we're at now is
Well, no, not so much when I played because there were still guys like Beezer's not a big guy.
no,
Even Richter's not a big guy.
no.
All right. But it was more about, in fact, they said like with Sean Burke, who was a big guy, but they were saying when these guys were so big, they had too big of a 5 hole, so that was the knock on them. They measured Bernie, and this was funny because they measured Bernie and everyone was trying to play just like Bernie. Like, Kelly Rudy had pads short just like Bernie. Everyone was trying to copy Bernie. But Bernie's legs were very short, especially from the knee to the ankle. And so they would measure our goalie to make, to keep the 5 hole, small. You know what I mean? And so, not that you could do anything about it. I mean, your body is your body. But my legs I have short legs, a short inseam, which Bernie had too. And Pelly was the same way. And so, I had a long torso, but so they said that, I had the same body as Bernie basically did. And I just wish I could have played the way Bernie did.
Do you have a number 33 Ranger sweater in that room as well?
Yeah.
Oh, see, Andy. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there it
Beautiful.
is.
Beautiful.
There it is.
Very
Right.
nice.
You got the jerseys as bookends, Bob. I love
Very
it.
nice.
Can you see that one?
Oh yeah.
Is
Okay.
that the All-Star jersey?
Yep.
Oh, tremendous.
Yeah.
I couldn't find any pictures of you from the 86. By the way, for our audience, you were the winning goalie in the 86 All-Star game.
Stopped Gretzky on a breakaway in overtime.
Nice.
Bob, it's all like just
Coming back to you now?
Oh, it's like yesterday.
See?
I mean, these are bullet points that are ingrained in my mind back when things were less social media-ish and we were all more on the same page, and hockey was a different thing then.
Andy, that All-Star game was on ESPN if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the first year back, right?
Yep, with Bill Clement and Tom Mees, and
Oh.
yeah, I remember the breakaway save.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff.
I gotta ask Bob, out of that era of epic players, who do you think was the toughest player to stop in a game?
Well, Lemieux was the most talented, okay? But Lemieux was he was a stubborn guy. And so early in his career, and I played at one point, I think I was 20-0 against Pittsburgh. All right. I think I lost a couple of games near the end, but and he was, he got a lot of breakaways. And early in his career, he tried to put the puck between my legs, and I somehow stopped him. After that, it was a cat and mouse game. He was going to try to put it between my legs, and he could have scored anywhere else in the net, but he was not putting it between my legs. And so he had the best shot, and he could pick a corner. He was just a tremendous. But the guy that I basically like, I take personal. It's kind of, I don't know if I'm proud of it, but I take personal responsibility for putting, let's say, 40 to 45 guys in the Hall of Fame. All right. So, but the guy that, there was two guys that seemed to score on me every game. One was a guy who wore number 11 in Edmonton, Mark Messier. And the other guy was McNabb in Boston. Oh. It seemed like every game. And so, but one game we played Minnesota, and there was a guy named Freddie Barrett, who was a defenseman. He never scored a goal, ever, whatever. And he scored a goal on me in the Spectrum. All right. And I think we won the game like 3-2, but he scored a goal. Okay. And the next morning it was announced that he signed a 3-year contract. So they were, they were, the guys in the team were saying I was responsible for that, for that guy getting a 3-year contract. So good for him.
And
the Bob Froese signing bonus. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ed, you got to get a question in for Bob.
Sure. Bob, who's your favorite guy? Who is your favorite guy on either the Flyers or the Rangers to watch on your team that you played with, and who is the guy that when they was walking in on you, who was the guy that you were just like, oh shit?
Mark Howe.
Yeah.
Mark Howe was the most gifted player I played with. I mean, it could do everything, and skate like the wind. No one was going to push him around. He had a wrist shot right up there with Wendell Clark. I mean, he had a hard shot, good moves, great defenseman, played forward, killing penalties. But he was, I thought he was by far the best player that I played with. And he had a pretty good father too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, some say, on the cusp of Hall of Famers, but we won't talk about that.
They just christened the bridge.
Yeah,
it's great. Yeah,
that's so good.
Right?
Yep, great stuff. Yep.
Yeah. I tell you, father was around the locker room quite a bit, and I knew him from Lake Placid. I worked hockey schools with him up in Lake Placid. We bought a place up in Lake Placid because of that. But we were just up there with two of our granddaughters a couple of weeks ago, and my wife was saying, "Do you remember when Gordie Howe took us here for lunch? Or remember when Gordie Howe took us here?" I said, "You know what? I took too many pucks to the head. I wish I could remember." Gordie Howe was such a great guy. I'm telling you what, and tell stories. He could tell stories, and he was just fantastic. And he was around the locker room all the time in Philly.
Nice.
Derek, question for Bob.
So I wanted to talk a little about equipment. Now, I wasn't a goalie, Bob. I'm not in the goalie union. My son was a goalie, so I'm in the goalie parent union. There is a difference, but I was thinking,
you know about the cost of goaltending then.
Yes. But I was looking through some photos and I noticed that two things stuck out to me. One, you were wearing Aeroflex pads, and two, I saw a Curtis Curve stick. Could you talk about those Aeroflex? Were very unique back then.
Yeah, they're very light and very a big rebound. So you had to know what you were doing. But the way I played, it really helped me. And I had trouble with one of my groins. And, back then it was a different game than it is now. I don't think they would ever do this now. But to play, you would get a shot. You know what I mean? And it would help you. It was, short-term gain, long-term pain. And so near the end, my one groin was tough in the same way that Hexie struggled, in the same way. But so the lighter pads were better for me, and that's why that was the main reason I went to the Aeroflex. But then once I started wearing them, I loved them. I thought they were fantastic. Now the Curtis Curve was ingenious because you put your paddle down, and because of the curve, your whole stick was on the ice. Instead of you have your paddle down, and then there's this, the puck could get underneath, the shaft of your stick. There, it didn't. I thought that was, Curtis was a genius for inventing that, and it was. I think I still have one somewhere. One of my sons has one, but I was so disappointed when they apparently the Victoriaville plant burnt down in Quebec, and they decided when they rebuilt it not to make them again.
Oh man, okay, nice. Thank you. That's good.
Bob, do you have a teammate that comes to mind that was like one of the biggest chirpers, that like funny, quick-witted on the ice, would say some outlandish stuff? Do you have a teammate that you could throw under the bus?
No, I wouldn't throw him under the bus, but Bob Froese was one of the funniest guys I played with. And, in New York there, he was just a natural goal scorer. But I was the first guy to wear a mic because when I played, I talked to the defenseman a lot, and, a lot of encouragement and stuff like that. And so Espo had decided, without me even asking me, he said he had told the press in New York that I was going to wear the mic. And so it just so happened that, in the second period, Pierre LaRouche came back and he said he had planned this all with me, and we won the game. We beat Pittsburgh, I think 4-1, and just so happened that I was the star of the game, and so it worked out really good. But LaRouche came back to me and he said, great save, Bobby. And then he had told me I was supposed to say, thanks a lot, Pierre. You're one of the best defensive players on the team, which was the farthest thing from the truth. But about that, like I know German growing up. Our family was German, and so there was Lindstrom, number I think 15 for the Penguins, standing in front of the net. I think his name was Lindstrom, and I started speaking to him in German. I was saying to him, "Schlechte Kinder," that means bad child, and that. And I'm thinking, so the guy Sam Rosen and John Davidson are howling because here I am during the game speaking, German to a Swede. All right, hoping that he could maybe understand what I was trying to say, but and then. Well, Beezer then, kind of got the itch, and he wanted to wear the mic. And so a few weeks later, Beezer wore the mic, but we ended up losing the game. And I didn't use much, if any, profanity. But during that game that Beezer did, it was mostly beep, beep, beep. So they didn't play that so much.
Eddie, question for Bob.
Or Bob, what's your favorite building to play in? Home and on the road.
Pittsburgh, and I love playing in the Spectrum. All right, Madison Square Garden. You're right, loved it. I played horrendous in Washington, and I don't know if it was because it was dimly lit because they had the first what's it called, the screen, and so I think they had to keep it like dark so that people could see the screen, and they didn't have the technology that they have today for sure. But I did not play well in Washington, but in Pittsburgh and in New York and in Philly, those arenas I played, I would play my better games.
It's funny you mentioned the Cap Center because as soon as you said that, I was thinking to myself, and I was going to ask Andy. It was always dark watching the game there, so that
always poor
always.
production.
Well, so Mike Gartner and I played junior together, and so Ron Greshner and I we spent a lot of time together, and we're walking in down the bus ramp, into the bowels, to where the locker rooms are. It's a morning skate. We're going in, and I see Gart's coming out, and so he stops and we're talking, and he said, "Hey, Froese, I'm in a slump right now." He said, "You think I could get a trick? Could you give me a trick tonight? 3 goals?" And I said, "Oh yeah, sure, no problems." 10 minutes into the game, this is no lie. Mike Gartner has scored 2 goals. We're down 2-0. Okay, and Gartz takes another shot, hits the crossbar, and goes up into the stands. The only time I've ever seen it, but our captain, Ron Greshner, called the timeout. All right. And so I came to the bench, and he's standing there in shock, and he's saying, "You were kidding, right? You were kidding. You weren't going to give a hat trick." And so it ended up that we tied the game 2-2. The game ended up tied 2-2, so it worked out.
Hey, Bob, is there a question that you've never been asked about a certain story that you've always wanted to tell?
Well, I will say this. I didn't treat Mike Keenan and I had a combative relationship. Okay. And when I got to New York, I felt somewhat, bad the way I treated him, and once again, I'm going back to the way I was raised. And so at the Drake Hotel in Chicago, the afternoon of the game, I wrote a letter to Mike asking him to forgive me for the way I hadn't been respectful or fallen under his authority in that, and gave it to the stick boy to go give to Mike, and so the stick boy did, and that. Well, the next morning we were practicing in Chicago. We played that night, and we were practicing the next morning in Chicago. But before practice, Espo came and got me. Said, "I want to see you in the coach's room." And so I went into the coach's room, and I'm thinking, "What's this all about?" I think I'd played the night before, and I played pretty well, and so I didn't know what he was saying. He says, "Froese, I'm going to do you one of the biggest favors that you've ever been done in your life." I'm thinking, this is interesting. And he said, Keenan called me last night after the game, and he's called me already this morning, and he he wants to trade for you. And he said, I am going to keep you in New York. I just want to let you know that Phil's an Italian guy, kind of an emotional guy, but I don't think he expected me to run up, hug him, and kiss him. All right, because that's what I did. All right, that he kept me in New York rather than going to Mike Keenan in Chicago.
Yes.
Very cool story.
Yes. Yes.
Ed, we'll start wrapping things up. So how about one last round of questions for Bob?
Sure. So when I guess as you were winding your career down, when did you kind of start to know, okay, this is going to be the last year or two? When you knew it was you're kicking the tires in the off season and being like, I think this may be it.
Well, I had a real bad shoulder, and I had it it started in junior. I popped it in junior really bad, and then it just progressively got worse. And like I say, the needles that we would get didn't do any, help. And so the last year I had trouble, and it was my stick side. So I had trouble with, moving my stick, and I was always pretty aggressive with my stick, the way I played, and Jacques Plante, my teacher. And so I couldn't play the way I wanted to. And so they decided in training camp, we were playing because of the Mike Keenan rules. You could only be at the rink for 3 hours. So Roger Nilsson had us playing flag football, and a guy named Brian Mullen, who was a good teammate, good friend of mine, just had a lot of fun with him. He was not trying to pull my flags off. He was trying to pull my shorts down. All right, and during that, I stepped in a pothole or whatever and sprained my ankle. Well, I'm on crutches for this sprained ankle. All right, my shoulder gives out, and all of a sudden, my hand went numb. Well, three fingers on my hand went numb. So uh, I go into and they do a bunch of tests and that, and so then they operated on it, and they said that most of my muscle had been eaten away from these shots, and the doctor who was the second leading doctor at doing athletes' shoulders in the country said to my wife, he'll never play again. It's so restrictive what we had to do to his shoulder. And he said that that's the first time a professional athlete's wife said "yippee" when got that news. So at that point, I was ready because the last couple of years my shoulder had been so bad. And you're just trying to guard it all the time. If you've ever had a bad shoulder, so it kind of takes it takes a little bit of the what we just say the fun out of it. So at that point I knew, and then right away they asked me would I come on and join the coaching staff, and so I thought that was pretty good.
Derek, a final question for Bob.
First, a comment. Just thank you so very much. This has been amazing. Great chat. One of my favorite. And obviously, I'm a little more partial, but this has been fantastic, Bob. And I love to see all the memorabilia in your room. So I had one of my questions here was, do you have like a favorite piece of memorabilia from your career?
Okay, can I show you? Can I move the
yeah.
camera?
By all means, please do. Oh my God.
Okay.
That. Wow.
That is a Lefty Wilson mask.
Wow.
Now, Chico Resch, who's a good friend of mine, all right, he's a memorabilia guy. He said it's worth like thousands of dollars. All right, but
wow.
I'll never sell it. None of my, my stuff. My boys have a bunch of stuff, and my Team Canada jersey and stuff like that, and different things. But that mask, when I look at it, it's crazy because there wasn't much protection. All right, because then it went from that then to this here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you went from hardly any protection. And then I'll just tell you a quick story. When I was playing ball hockey, this is before I was playing like in a league, a hockey league, but we were playing ball hockey, and I saw my mom's bleach bottle. And so I emptied the bleach down the drain, and I cut out a mask like that and put string on it and cut the eyes, cut everything just the way they had it on TV, And so I go out to play ball hockey and I'm in net. And after about 15 minutes, I'm almost passing out because of the smell of the bleach. I'm asphyxiating myself. So that was the last time I wore that mask.
So, Bob, I got two questions. One is the usual that I wrap everything up with, but the first one is, if Hollywood came calling and they wanted to make the Bob Froese story, who plays Bob Froese?
Marty Feldman. Is he still alive?
It's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
You didn't even have to think about that, so I'm sure awesome. you thought about it before. So I always end every podcast with this. If you had to define your career in one word, what would it be?
Dream.
Very good. Very awesome. Good. Well, just to piggyback on that, this is like a dream for us because
it really is.
If you only knew the young Derek and Andy that traded hockey cards, like their value was millions of dollars back when Topps and OPG was a myth in the U.S. This is from a young us to an old us. I got to tell you, friend of the show going forward, Bob Froese, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and love to have you back on eventually, Bob, and talk more and maybe get maybe the goalie union on or something. So very, very thankful that you spent time with us.
Thanks. I can assure you guys it's my pleasure.
Thank you.
I love talking hockey. Thanks a lot. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
So we'll send you a better link next time too, Bob.
All right. Thanks.